Jabu lived in a village nestled near the savannah. The village was a vibrant place, full of life and color. The people there lived in harmony with nature, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of the land. The air buzzed with life, a symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves. The savannah was a vast, open expanse, teeming with wildlife. It was a place of beauty and danger, where every day was an adventure. One day, Jabu wandered further than usual. He loved exploring the savannah, discovering new places and creatures. The tall grasses whispered secrets as he walked, and the wind carried the scent of distant flowers. He chased a mischievous monkey, its chatter leading him deeper into the tall grasses. The air grew still. The monkey was gone. Jabu looked around, realizing he was in an unfamiliar part of the savannah. Jabu turned to go back, a prickle of unease on his neck. The savannah, which had seemed so inviting, now felt vast and empty. He felt a chill run down his spine as he realized how far he had wandered. That's when he saw him, a figure in the distance, lying still. Jabu squinted, trying to make out what it was. A magnificent lion, sprawled beneath a baobab tree. But something was wrong. The lion, usually a symbol of strength and power, looked weak and vulnerable. The lion lay very still, its chest barely moved with each shallow breath. Jabu's heart pounded in his chest as he took a cautious step closer. His mane, usually a crown of gold, was matted with dried blood. The sight filled Jabu with a mix of fear and sadness. He had never seen a lion in such a state. One of his powerful legs was twisted at an unnatural angle. It was clear the lion was in pain, unable to move. Jabu felt a surge of empathy for the majestic creature.
Fear coiled in my stomach. I'd always been taught to fear lions, to respect their power and keep my distance. But this lion was different. It was hurt, vulnerable. I'd heard the elders' stories, tales of lions as fierce protectors of the savannah, but also as dangerous predators. They spoke of the balance of nature and the respect we must have for all creatures. Lions were dangerous, to be feared and avoided. Their roars could be heard for miles, a reminder of their dominance. But this lion, lying helplessly, challenged everything I had been taught. Yet looking at the creature's pain, I felt a pang of sympathy. The lion's eyes, usually fierce and commanding, were now filled with pain and confusion. I couldn't just leave it there. I knew I should leave, but something held me there, a sense of responsibility, a desire to help. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. The savannah was a place of survival, but it was also a place of compassion, and in that moment, I chose compassion.
Jabu backed away slowly, his heart pounding like a drum. The lion didn't move. He ran. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The fear was palpable, almost tangible, as if it had a life of its own. He could feel the weight of the lion's gaze on his back, even though he knew it wasn't following him. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees whispering secrets of ancient fears and untold dangers. He ran until the village came into view, the familiar huts a comfort in the twilight. The sight of the village brought a sense of relief, a sanctuary from the wild unknown. The warm glow of the fires and the soft murmur of voices were a stark contrast to the silence of the forest. He slowed down, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his legs trembling from the exertion. The village was his safe haven, a place where the fears of the forest couldn't reach him. That night, Jabu lay awake. The events of the day replayed in his mind, each detail etched into his memory. The lion's eyes, filled with pain and fear, haunted him. He tossed and turned, unable to find solace in sleep. The darkness of the night seemed to amplify his thoughts, making them louder and more insistent. He could hear the distant sounds of the village, the occasional bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves in the wind, but they did little to comfort him. The elders' warnings echoed in his ears. Their voices, filled with wisdom and caution, seemed to surround him. Lions are beasts, they had said. They are dangerous. Stay away. Their words were meant to protect him, to keep him safe from the dangers of the wild. But now they felt like chains, binding him to his fear. He respected the elders, their knowledge and experience, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story.
Lions are beasts, they said. They are dangerous. Stay away. Their words were stern, their faces serious. They spoke of the dangers of the wild, the unpredictability of nature. They had seen the damage a lion could do, the lives it could take. Their warnings were not to be taken lightly. But Jabu couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. Was the lion truly a beast, or was it simply a creature in pain, in need of help?
But another voice whispered within him, a voice of compassion. It was a quiet voice, gentle and kind, urging him to see beyond the fear. It spoke of empathy, of understanding the pain of another living being. It reminded him of the times he had been hurt and how he had longed for someone to help him. This voice was not as loud as the elders, but it was persistent, and it resonated deeply within him. He remembered the lion's pain, the way its chest rose and fell with each labored breath. The memory was vivid, the image of the lion struggling to breathe etched into his mind. He could almost feel the lion's pain, its desperation. It was a feeling he couldn't ignore, a call to action that he couldn't dismiss. The lion was not just a beast, it was a living creature, suffering and in need of help. The memory filled him with a strange mix of fear and responsibility. He was afraid, yes, but he also felt a duty to help. It was a conflict of emotions, a battle between his fear and his compassion. He knew the risks, the dangers of approaching a wild animal, but he also knew that he couldn't just walk away. The lion's suffering was a call he couldn't ignore, a plea for help that resonated deeply within him. He couldn't leave the lion to suffer. The thought of the lion in pain, alone and helpless, was unbearable. He had to do something, anything to help. It was a decision that came from deep within, a resolve that was stronger than his fear. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and dangers, but he was determined to try. The lion's life depended on it, and he couldn't turn his back on that responsibility. The next morning, Jabu gathered his courage. He woke up with a sense of purpose, a determination that had taken root in his heart. He looked at himself in the mirror, seeing not just a boy, but someone who could make a difference. He knew what he had to do, and he was ready to face the challenges ahead. It was a daunting task, but he was prepared to give it his all. The lion needed him, and he wouldn't let it down. He snuck into the forest, his heart heavy with worry and a strange sense of purpose. The forest was a different place in the daylight, the shadows less menacing, the sounds more familiar. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of his mind. He moved quietly, carefully, his senses alert to every sound and movement. He was on a mission, and he couldn't afford to be distracted. The lion was waiting, and he had to find it. He found his way back to the baobab tree, fear battling with determination. The tree stood tall and ancient, a silent witness to the events unfolding. It was a landmark, a guidepost in the vastness of the forest. Jabu took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The fear was still there, but so was the determination. He couldn't let the fear win. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to turn back now. The lion was still there. It lay in the shade of the baobab tree, its breathing labored, its eyes half closed. It looked even more vulnerable in the daylight, its pain more evident. Jabu's heart ached at the sight. He knew he had to act quickly, to help the lion before it was too late. The sight of the lion, so powerful yet so helpless, strengthened his resolve. He had to do something, and he had to do it now. Jabu approached cautiously, his hand outstretched. Each step was measured, careful, his eyes never leaving the lion. He could feel his heart pounding, the fear threatening to overwhelm him. But he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The lion needed him, and he couldn't let it down. He moved closer, his hand reaching out, a gesture of peace and help. He was scared, but he was also determined. This was his moment, and he was ready to face it.
"Don't be afraid," I whispered, more to myself than the injured creature. "I'm here to help." The words were a promise, a vow to do whatever it took to help the lion. They were also a reassurance, a way to calm his own fears. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it. The lion's life depended on him, and he wouldn't let it down. He was scared, but he was also determined. This was his moment, and he was ready to face it.
Every day, Jabu visited the lion. He brought fresh water from the watering hole, carefully holding it to the lion's mouth. He collected herbs his grandmother used for healing, hoping they might ease the lion's pain. As days turned into weeks, a bond began to form.
I named the lion Bubesi, which meant lion in my language. It felt right to give him a name, to see him as more than just a beast.
Bubesi, though weak, seemed to appreciate Jabu's efforts. He lapped up the water and allowed Jabu to tend to his wounds. Sometimes he would nudge Jabu's hand with his head, a silent thank you. Jabu learned that Bubesi wasn't ferocious at all. He discovered the intelligence in the lion's eyes, the gentle rumbling purr that vibrated through the air. Bubesi was not the monster the elders described. One afternoon, while Jabu collected berries, a chilling sound reached his ears. A gunshot. His blood ran cold. He knew that sound. He had heard it before, whispered in hushed tones by the elders, poachers. They were a danger to all animals, especially lions. Jabu's heart pounded in his chest. They were a threat to Bubesi. He had to warn him.
Poachers. They're here. They're hunting.
Jabu raced through the savannah, fear lending speed to his feet. He reached the baobab tree, out of breath and filled with dread. Bubesi sensed his fear, his ears perked up, his gaze alert. Bubesi let out a low growl, a sound that sent shivers down Jabu's spine. Despite his injuries, Bubesi tried to rise. He was weak, vulnerable. Jabu knew he had to do something, to protect his friend. He had to warn the others, to get help. Jabu knew what he had to do. He raced back towards the village, the image of Bubesi's vulnerable form etched in his mind. He burst into the village, fear and adrenaline lending urgency to his voice.
Poachers. They're in our lands, hunting the lions.
The villagers gathered around, their faces etched with concern and disbelief. The elders, their faces grave, listened intently. They had warned their children about the dangers of the savannah, instilled fear in their hearts. But Jabu's fear was different. He wasn't afraid of Bubesi, the lion he had befriended. He was afraid him.
We have to help him. He's injured. He can't protect himself.
The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Their traditions ran deep, their fear of lions ingrained over generations. But they saw the truth in Jabu's eyes, the courage that belied his young age. Jabu led the villages, their apprehension battling with concern, towards Bubesi. The air was thick with tension, each step they took echoing the unspoken fears and hopes of the community. Jabu, a young boy with a heart braver than most, had taken it upon himself to guide them to the injured lion, Bubesi, whose name meant king in their language. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the savannah in hues of orange and purple. The beauty of the landscape was a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. The savannah, usually a place of life and vibrancy, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the outcome of this unprecedented encounter. They found Bubesi beneath the baobab tree, his massive head resting on his paws. The baobab, known as the Tree of Life, stood as a silent guardian over the scene, its ancient branches stretching out like protective arms. Bubesi's once majestic form was now marred by wounds, a testament to the harsh realities of the wild. He watched the approaching villagers with wary eyes, his breath shallow and raspy. The lion's gaze, though filled with pain, held a glimmer of trust, a fragile thread that Jabu had managed to weave through his acts of kindness and bravery.
You risked your life for this creature? Her voice trembled with a mix of fear and disbelief, unable to comprehend the bond her son had formed with the king of the savannah.
Jabu's mother, her face etched with worry, rushed to his side. She had always known her son was different, but this act of courage and compassion was beyond anything she had imagined. Her voice was filled with a mixture of fear and pride. She feared for his safety, yet she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at his bravery and the depth of his empathy. Jabu nodded, his gaze never leaving Bubesi. In his young heart, he knew that this was the right thing to do. The lion had shown him a side of nature that was both fierce and vulnerable, and he felt a deep connection to the majestic creature. He saw the fear in the villagers' eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps even compassion. The villagers who had always seen lions as threats were now witnessing a different narrative unfold before their eyes. The elders approached cautiously, their steps hesitant. These were men and women who had lived their entire lives with a deep-seated fear of lions, and now they were being asked to see them in a new light. They had lived their lives believing lions were nothing but dangerous beasts. The stories passed down through generations had painted lions as the ultimate predators, and this belief was hard to shake. Jabu's actions challenged their deeply held beliefs. His bravery and compassion were forcing them to reconsider their understanding of the natural world and their place within it.
The wounds are deep, but not beyond healing. The elder's voice was calm, filled with a wisdom that came from years of living in harmony with the land.
Jabu watched as the village elder, his face weathered by time and wisdom, knelt beside Bubesi. The elder's presence brought a sense of calm to the tense situation, his actions speaking louder than words. He examined the lion's wounds, his touch surprisingly gentle for one who had feared these creatures his entire life. The elder's hands, though rough from years of labor, moved with a tenderness that spoke of a deep respect for all living things. This moment, where fear and compassion intertwined, marked the beginning of a new understanding between the villagers and the king of the savannah.